This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. The federal government's preparing to begin automatically registering eligible U.S. men ages 18 to 26 for the military draft pool. The U.S. hasn't had a draft since 1973, but it still maintains a registry of eligible men in case the draft is restored. The new rules around automatic military draft registration were tucked into the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. In early March, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt did not rule out President Trump reinstating the draft itself. She was questioned by Fox News host Maria Bartiromo.
Mothers out there are worried that we're going to have a draft, that they're going to see their sons get in and daughters get involved in this. What do you want to say about the president's plans for troops on the ground? As we know, it's been largely an air campaign up until now.
It has been, and it will continue to be. And President Trump wisely does not remove options off of the table.
We're joined now by Edward Hasbrouck, organizer with the Anti-Draft Coalition, which opposes the plan for automatic registrations, calling for repeal of the Military Selective Service Act. Editor and publisher of Resistors.info. He is a member of the War Resisters League and the Military Law Task Force of the National Lawyers Guild. His recent piece for Responsible Statecraft is headlined, "Even if Team Trump wanted a military draft would be a fiasco," unquote. In the 1980s, Hasbrouck publicly refused to register for the draft and spent 6 months in prison. Can you talk, Edward, about what has changed? What is this draft registry that the Trump administration is bringing back?
Well, since 1980, men have been supposed to register with the Selective Service System within 30 days of their 18th birthday and tell Selective Service within 10 days every time they move until they reach age 26. Very few people do. The efforts to enforce that against a handful of public non-registrants whose public statements could be used to convict us collapsed in the early 1980s. Nobody has been prosecuted in decades. But in the face of growing pressure to recognize the failure of Selective Service and the unavailability of a draft, instead, to save their jobs, the Selective Service System came up with a plan, which they managed to sneak through Congress last year, to give Selective Service a second chance to try to register potential draftees automatically. Now, that won't work because the federal government doesn't have the data they need, but it will produce a database that's highly vulnerable to misuse and weaponization. And even more importantly, it will continue to prop up the myth that the draft is available as a fallback, which in turn enables continued planning for larger, longer wars without war planners having to think about whether enough people would be willing to fight them.
Why do you write that to activate the draft?
Yeah, we'll come back and finish that off in a minute here. All right. Shalom. Before I get started, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. I'm back with another quick lesson. I want to get straight to the point. All right. So, I was looking up the some detailed scenarios according to the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 15, verses 14 through 19. All right, I'm going to read that in a minute. And that's pretty much the base of this lesson here, right? But before we even get into that, let's just read this, and I'm going to play this heavy clip next. All right. But this article is from the Daily Callers News Foundation.org. The headline reads, it says, fears of a U.S. draft grow as the Selective Service modernizes. All right, this came out July 31st, 2026. All right, a few days ago, somewhere in there, about a week ago, right? Fears of a U.S. draft grow as the Selective Service modernizes, man. All right, so let's just read some points and then get to the video clip here I want to really play. All right. It says, as the program that manages the U.S. draft modernizes, commenters are debating whether a potential draft is around the corner. All right, we know as they made that announcement at the end of this year. All right. Isaiah 13 comes to mind, man. The Lord is, gathering up the troops, man, preparing them for the battle. Okay, it says the U.S. Selective Service is responsible for managing the U.S. draft and is currently pushing to modernize the mechanisms that could make the draft a reality, right? The Military Times reported. As this event is closely timed with an escalation into the Russo-Ukrainian and Iran wars, some experts have begun debating whether or not a draft could be looming, right? It says the draft could be as soon as a few years from now, former Green Beret and war correspondent Michael Young told the Daily College News Foundation, right? Let's read a little bit more, straight to the point. Right now, they are probing and putting it out there to make people used to the idea like, okay, we're just going to register now. Young told the DCNF. That's all it is. So they've been floating it for a while, all right? It says there, quote, there is very little prospect for a traditional military draft of the sort the country has relied upon in previous eras. Peter Feaver, a professor at political science and public policy at Duke University, told DCNF, quote, a traditional military draft would hobble the armed services with the logistical nightmare, a scheme of national service for which service in uniform is one of many options, might be more practical. It says, I support such a scheme, but there's little political momentum even for something like that. All right. Blah, blah, blah. All right. So again, we all know that this draft is around the corner, especially at the height of what's going on in the planet Earth right now. All right. So check this out before we read on here. All right. Check this quick video out and, you be the judge. All right. A time like no other, as I've been saying.
Likely they'll end up being a draft. They'll use that to kill off a lot of people like us or our children, that sort of thing. But keep in mind, as a draft comes, who are they going to put in American uniforms? They'll put in like the Haitians and the Bangladeshis and that sort of thing. Sure. That can be used to kill us. They don't even speak our language, that sort of thing.
True.
This is normal. Keep in mind, historically, this is normal. Listen, I was in special forces, right? Why does special forces even exist? Special forces existed to go raise foreign armies, right? Yep. Like Jesuit style, right? I mean, that's what they did. And that's what they do, right? And so, this, I look at it through a lens that maybe some people don't, but I mean, this is normal business, is to go somewhere and raise. Look, when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan,
you can't use money no more. You can't shop. They can, freeze your bank account because you'll be deemed a traitor, a domestic T or whatever label they put on you. Okay. You're going to be pretty much, shunned from society. Right. And that's what's going to cause the internal wars. So like I said, I want to go through the potential scenarios that could play out based off of 2 Ezra 15. All right. Let me just read this real quick. 2 Ezra 15:14. And it reads, it says, woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and the destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there should be sedition among men, and invading one another, they should not regard their kings nor princes. In the course of their actions shall stand in the power, right? So we're talking about, civil wars, okay, sedition, revolutions out there in the streets, bloodshed, A man should desire to go into a city and should not be able, as he was just talking about. You ain't gonna be able to travel. You're not gonna be able to move freely through society, different things like that. For because of their pride, the city should be troubled, the houses should be destroyed, and men should be afraid. And man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but should destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. All right. So let's just read a little bit, and I'll finish that first clip off as well. Just want to get there. Matter of fact, we'll finish that off and then we'll get there, Salakia. So let's just finish it off. Let's play that back again. All right. So here we go.
Don't show up for the draft. All your funding is cut. Your digital money that they'll end up having, you don't have any money. Your car doesn't work. Your electricity goes out. You can't go through the airport, or you'll be scarfed up and taken to a back room and thrown in a container and taken off to Fort Bragg or something, right? They'll kill you off. Look what's happening with the the Ukrainians.
Yep.
They're kidnapping those guys off the streets. They're going to end up doing this draft. I strongly think that they'll do this. Keep in mind, if you want to sound like Nostradamus of war prediction, just predict these things and you'll be right. The war will grow. The war will grow, and it will grow out of control like a wildfire. It'll last longer than people expect, and it ends up in places that most people didn't predict. But again, this is a process war. It's been going on for many centuries at least. This is our train stop and people are going to react to it the way that they react to it. If you make mistakes, you may die. This is big boy rules. If you screw up and take the jab, you're dead, right? This is no joke, right? It's the same with like landmines. You step, boom, you're dead, right? And it's the same right now. If you answer that draft, they're going to jab you up. You're going to be sent off to some war and you'll be killed, right? That's probably what will happen. This is not about defending the United States. We all know that. People watching this show in particular realize this is not about defending the United States.
Yeah, and if you don't know that by now, especially the merger between the militaries, the governments, America's government and the small hats, it's over, man. All right. They're running this shit right now. All right. And this is where it's headed. Everything he was saying, I was just thinking about those scenarios in 2nd Ezra 15. Let's go there. All right. Again, a time like no other, man. Let's just read this. Just give some detail. I had the chat give me some detailed examples, right? 2nd Ezra 15, 14 through 19 contains a series of judgments described in highly symbolic and prophetic language. Many readers understand these verses differently. Some view them as referring to events surrounding the Roman era. Others see them as future end times prophecy, and others read them as apocalyptic literature using vivid imagery to communicate themes of divine judgment rather than a specific sequence of modern events, right? It says, if someone interprets this passage as describing a future judgment, this can involve the United States. A hypothetical scenario might unfold like this. Verse 14, woe to the world and them that dwell therein. This introduces a period of worldwide distress rather than a problem confined to one nation, right? Possible modern example, global financial instability, okay? Multiple wars occurring simultaneously, right? So you're going to have the shit that's going on, the conflict that's going on in the so-called Middle East, and you're going to have shit going on within America, all over America, okay? All over the world, all right? Food shortages, right? Which we've been talking about the stages that we're in right now, the Strait of Hormuz, all right? A shortage in commodities and goods, okay? So we're between those grounds now. Widespread natural disasters, we've been seeing that. Cyber attacks disrupting infrastructure, which they made a big deal about that. Okay, they say it was going to come from Iran, Russia, and China. Okay, banks are vulnerable, airports are vulnerable. They're saying hospitals are vulnerable. They're saying the water supply is vulnerable. It could get hacked. Okay, America would be affected alongside many other nations. Verse 15, for the sword in the destruction draweth nigh. The sword often symbolizes warfare or violent conflict in scripture. A hypothetical American scenario could include escalating foreign wars, all right? This is what's happening now. Domestic terrorism, right? Because, it's sleeper cells, agent provocateurs, all right? Certain people set up to do certain things, all right, to cause different effects around the globe, around America, Violently divided political factions, all right? That's happening now. The left versus the right, red versus blue, conservative versus wokeism, okay? Pro-American, anti, the whole ordeal, right? The polarization, National Guard deployments, all right? Martial law, okay? Riots, riot control, okay? Because people, the point we're talking about, right? Let's go back, right? fears of a U.S. draft grow. All right, most of the so-called American people are not for the war. So when they mandate this thing and they force you, what you think is going to happen? What do you think the people's going to do at that point? Okay, and that's going to add to it the chaos and disorder. Right? Go back. It says urban unrest, right? Urban unrest spreading into multiple cities. That's what we read. 2 Ezra 15 and in 18, for because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men should be afraid. That's it. Urban unrest spreading into multiple cities, infrastructure sabotage instead of isolated riots. Violence becomes nationwide, man. Okay, Ezekiel 7. Let me get that real quick. Okay. You got the problem and then you got the reaction. This is the reaction of all of this, man, when society is cut down, when shut off, you know. A mandatory draft comes into play, right? Ezekiel 7 and 5, it says, thus saith the Lord power, Yahweh Shemir Washai, and evil and only evil, behold, is come. And the end is come, the end is come. It watcheth for thee, behold, it is come. The morning is come unto thee, O thou dwellest in the land. The time is come, the day of trouble is near, and not sounding again in the mountains, man. This is what we telling you, right? But you got to have the spirit to see it. It's easy to receive, man. This is what's gonna happen if they do this, right? Anyway, let's read some more. Verse 16, one people should stand up and fight against another and swords in their hands. Many readers understand this as a describing civil conflict, a hypothetical progression, deep political polarization, right? That's going on now, man. Deep political divide, man. Okay? Economic hardship intensifies, man. Okay? People's pockets are hurting, man. Financial distress is getting worse. All right? Gas is slowly going back up. Groceries are still high as hell. Price of living is still up. Things are becoming unaffordable. That's your so-called average American right now, man. Okay, Revelation 6 comes to mind, man. The bread, barley for a penny, you know. Economic hardship intensifies, competing armed groups form. That's a big deal right there. This is what we're talking about. The different Edomite militia groups, the far rights, the Pride Boys, you know, the Triple K, you know, these different Edomite supremacy groups, and they're going to be the main ones patrolling and slaughtering shit when this shit go down, because they showed you that in that movie Purge. All right, I forgot which one it was, but the ones where they had the pretty much they had the militia groups running the streets, man, going after Jake. And that's really what they're waiting on, man. When there's no more law and order, they're going to have these deputized Edomites with the guns. Okay. Local governments disagree with federal authorities. That's more divide within this American system. Protests evolve into armed confrontations, man. People are going to be rolling up to these damn mayors and politicians and shit. You know, people who issue out the decrees and all of that. Judges. Neighborhoods become divided by ideology, man. Because remember, they're going to be you're going to have those people that's going to snitch. They're going to be telling on you, report this person if you see this strange activity. All right. This person didn't take the chip. He didn't want to get the new round of jabs. You know, you believe in the truth. They know who you are, you know, because think about it, man. We're in a surveillance state, man. They got everything mapped out, categorized. They know who's who. All that's going to be used in that time, as he was talking about. Right. Swords in modern context can simply represent contemporary weapons rather than literal ancient swords, right? The modern day sword is the gun. All right, verse 17, it says, and this is heavy stuff, right? Verse 17, there should be sedition among men. Sedition refers to rebellion against authority, right? So imagine they mandate a draft, right? You hear these people online like, my kids are not fighting in this war. So what do you think gonna happen? Okay. Possible examples include states refusing federal directives, and you're gonna have certain states that may not be with the technocracy. They may not want data centers up in their states and in their cities and shit. You know, they may not want, using the MOTB. You know, they might be against that. You know, you're gonna have a pushback, scanning your eyes and shit. You know, showing your ID to buy groceries. You know, widespread strikes shutting down transportation, police shortages. We've been talking about that. 911 is not going to exist. You know, they're only going to come. The police are only going to come for certain emergencies. If it's not a true emergency according to them, they're not coming. Government institutions losing legitimacy, right? Competing authorities claiming jurisdiction. Emergency declarations becoming common, right? As order weakens, ordinary people may increasingly rely on local communities for security, right? People are going to have to watch their own neighborhoods, man, right? Different gangs and shit coming together, you know, terrorizing at the same time, robbing neighborhoods, you know. You never know how it's going to play out. It's going to be in that manner. Invading one another, possible modern parallels, looting neighborhoods, right? It's going to be a lot of that. Armed robberies becoming organized. Yeah, see? Organized gangs, niggas, YNs, militias. Okay? Home invasions increasing because people are not going to have shit. Okay? They should invade. What does it say? 2 Corinthians 15 and 19. And man should have no pity upon his neighbor, but should destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. There you go. Right? It says, let me go back. Armed robberies becoming organized. Home invasions increasing. Rural communities establishing checkpoints. Gangs competing for resources. Right? That was like, what was the movie with Denzel Washington? Book of Eli, you know? How them gangs is roaming the cities and shit, taking over. This would reflect the breakdown of normal civil order rather than conventional warfare alone. A little bit more. They should not regard their kings nor princes. This describes a rejection of leadership. Possible examples: public refusal to obey government orders, right? Curfews and shit, right? Mass resignations among officials. Right, because they're not going to have the answers. They're not going to be able to save society at that point. So what the hell they going to do? They're going to get out of there. Military members to another part of the state, you know? Prime example, you see how they do Jake neighborhoods compared to Edomite neighborhoods. Edomite neighborhoods got everything. They got the resources. They got the stores, right? Jake part of town is going to be cooked. You know, they're going to have the security and shit. Jake ain't gonna have nothing, right? It says houses shall be destroyed. Possible causes include rioting, fires, armed conflict, natural disasters occurring during instability, explosion from damaged infrastructure. Man, you know they're gonna be blowing shit up. Okay. Men should be afraid. Fear could stem from uncertainty about food and fuel, constant emergency alerts. Lack of reliable information, right? Because you ain't going to have the internet for real. You ain't going to be able to just jump on your phone and on your computer. You know? Concern for family safety, economic insecurity, ongoing violence. And within that too comes to mind. Let me get that in Isaiah 4:1. Because when all of this shit going on, what you think women going to be doing, bro? All right, Isaiah 4:1. You think they're going to be out there rambling shit out? You know? Isaiah 4:1, it says, in that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by their name to take away our reproach, man. So, hey, women going to be seeking out a righteous man in that time. The man of the Lord, which is going to be of true high value during all this damn chaos and destruction, man. Because, hey, don't forget, you know, women Women will be open game when there's no more law and order, man. Okay? You want to talk about how niggas is sick and weird, you know, and give you the ick and all that shit. Wait until there's no more law and order, man. When there ain't no more police. All right? Ain't no more 911. You ain't calling niggas to come save you. That's not happening, man. Talk about get with the program. Whoo, man. She gonna fall in line. She ain't got no choice. Right? It's gonna be either fall in order, fall in line, or off with your head. Straight up. You know, ain't gonna be none of that, you know, her opinion and shit. You know what I'm saying? What she think, what she believe in, and how she thinks shit's supposed to go. That's gonna be a thing of the fucking past. You know? So imagine a woman doing all of this, man. You know, you got to be in the spirit. You got to see the vision. This is what I'm saying. I just want to go through hypothetical scenarios that's going to happen according to prophecy here, man. Okay? Let's finish it out. It says, see what else we got. Lack of reliable information, concern for family safety, economic insecurity, ongoing violence, man. There's going to be bodies in the street. People are going to be desensitized to see, you know what I'm saying, corpses on the street and shit like that, man. Okay, shootouts. Right? Drive-bys, people getting snatched up. Verse 19, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor. This describes a severe deterioration of social trust, right? Because look at the world now. You can't trust nobody for real. You know, I'm just saying in the spirit, like look how the world has gotten to that point now. You know, it says possible examples. People hoarding supplies, right? People gonna run in them stores, clean them out. All right, them warehouse stores, them big, you know, Sam's Clubs, BJ's, Costco's. All right, it's gonna be rising up in them stores too. All right, price gouging. You know, $1,000 for a loaf of bread, $500, $800 for some milk. You know, theft becoming widespread. Neighbors refusing to help one another, right? You know, because you help somebody, then they're gonna know what you got. You know, they're gonna know what you're sitting on, man. So it's gonna be wise to stay to yourself, man, because you trust the neighbor, you're gonna get, you know, it's not gonna work out. People gonna be turning on each other, right? For the lack of resources. Fraud increasing during crisis, right? Shall destroy the houses of the sword. This may depict violent seizures of property. A hypothetical example, armed groups searching homes for food. Yep, it shows you that in the purge. Right? The militia groups was kicking down the doors, taking everything people had, shooting those that was in the house. Right? Organized looting. Gangs, all that. Gangs, the gangs and the militia groups are the main ones that's going to be causing hell. Right? Martial law troops, all that. Foreign troops. Property disputes escalating into violence. Criminal organizations exploding, weaken law enforcement. Yeah, because they're going to be the ones that's going to take over. They're going to be the new enforcement. Okay? Because of the lack of bread, this echoes a reoccurring biblical theme in which famine contributes to social instability. Modern factors that could contribute include crop failures, right? That's going on now. This is why they're trying to get rid of all the cows and chickens and, you know, the carbon bullshit. You know, Earth's getting hotter. We got to start creating more, you know, synthetic food, all that. Transportation disruptions, fuel shortages, port closures, supply chains interruptions, right? Inflation making necessities unaffordable, right? Which we're getting to that point now. For great tribulation, this passage culminates in a picture of widespread distress affecting society at multiple levels: war, scarcity, fear, and the erosion of civil order. A hypothetical sequence: if someone applies this prophecy to a future American setting, they might imagine a progression such as 1. Major economic downturn and inflation, supply chain disruptions leading to shortages, political polarization becoming increasingly violent, localized riots expanding into broader unrest, right? It's going to spread nationwide. Infrastructure failures affecting power, water, and communications, which they're talking about now. All right. These elites are trying to do away with the water through the AI, the data centers, right? The power grid is vulnerable, as they've been talking about. Cyber attacks, blackouts, EMPs, okay, hacks, food scarcity driving to desperation, right? People are going to get more desperate because they got families to feed. Crime and organized violence increasing. That's mandatory. Government struggling to maintain order. That's going to happen. Communities becoming isolated and relying on local defense. A prolonged period of national hardship. Yeah, that's them evils. Ezekiel, the 7th chapter. Okay. This is one plausible interpretive model rather than a prediction. The text itself does not identify the United States by name. Of course it doesn't. But we know via the Spirit. Nor does it specifically, or nor does it specify modern nations. So any application to America involves theological interpretation rather than a direct statement of the passage. Many readers connect these verses with broader biblical themes found in passages such as Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Revelation, while others understand them primarily within their historical and literary context, right? So we understand it through the Spirit. Okay, that's why I said, hey, blessed who has the eyes to see, ears to hear, man. A wise man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, right? So we understand these possible hypothetical sequences through a prophetic lens. That's what I'm saying. You know, so this went into good detail here, man. I just want to play this part back again. We'll wrap it up, man. Just showing you, man, the severity, the reality of this thing, man. All right.